Syria to fulfill the prophecies in Isaiah is destroyed. Damascus is destroyed 1 hour. All these different events come to pass, and obviously the world's going to look for a solution, okay? And the solution is going to be provided by the very people that have initiated this World War III. And I want to make it clear, the Gog-Magog war is not the Battle of Armageddon, okay?
You mean it gets worse?
Yes, it does. Because, again, according to the roadmap, Bible prophecy, we've got 42 months of the most horrific and hellific, a new word, hellish and absolutely horrific combined, hellific period of time where, quite candidly, the Bible declares that half the world's population is going to perish. That puts it at about 3 billion people.
Which, they want it down to 500 million people.
Exactly. You remember when you and I first started talking about that, you talking obviously before we met and you brought me on your show. The point is that people didn't believe that. But now they're seeing more and more people talking about it. And let's look at the famine issue, the weather. If I can control the weather, I can control seemingly the ability to grow things. I can flood specific areas. I can dry out specific areas. And the idea of weather warfare, which is, I think, one of the most important books I've ever written, I'm telling people, if they understand weather warfare and understand that this isn't something that's out there in la-la land, but that the United States government openly has documents on the Internet that the former secretaries of defense, whether it's Cohen or whether it's Zygmunt Brzezinski, National Security Advisor, talking about back in the 70s that nations will make war on nations, that the United Nations has treaties against it. So what's a treaty worth in this world, okay?
We talked a little bit about weather wars last night with meteorologist Scott Stevens, and this morning, this afternoon, I was out having lunch, and the waiters and waitresses who listen to Coast religiously, I asked them, I says, do you really think weather can be manipulated and used as a weapon? All of them said, yes, we believe that. It's amazing if you polled people.
Well, and I would say this, that most of them that listen to you would obviously have to say, look, these guys, whether it's Scott Stevens, myself, or others that are outspoken in the area of weather war, and by the way, they're using a lot of high-energy lasers, and somebody just sent me an email saying that they actually were watching the temperature of the tops of the clouds hit the 100 to 105 degree. That's done with lasers, okay, not just a radio frequency or HARP-type ionospheric heaters. By the way, the Russians are openly stating that they're using their hurricane cannons against the U.S.
So here we go. We're in the midst of this. Can this be negotiated out?
I don't think so, because the powers that be want this war.
That's the problem.
That's the problem. Nobody sane wants this war to the degree that, let's say, if someone said, well, you can't stop it. I actually have people tell me, go to hell, you can't stop it. I say, I can't stop it, but if I can save one life, 1,000, or 1,000,000, that's what I'm about. I can't stop this stuff, but I can warn people, and if people are destroyed for lack of knowledge, then they can be preserved with the specific knowledge. So this thing is, the rhetoric is increasing, George. It's not only the rhetoric, but it was after your show, I think it was either the first or second show you and I ever did together, I was contacted by two Cuban PhDs in molecular biology that had been in prisons, and they broke loose, came to Miami, and they were telling me about the biological weapons development down in Cuba and some of the old Russian bases. And they were talking to me then, and this is, before anybody
5 years ago.
5 years ago, anybody even knew that there was bird flu, okay? And the thing is they were talking about the birds being infected and taken into the ocean and released, offshore the United States.
Which we believe was created.
Well, one of the interesting things is that the Americans have had some of the most amazing defectors from the Soviet Union. The highest-ranking guys in the world in the KGB, Golitsyn, Suvorov, all these different people. Vasily Mitrokhin. Vasily Mitrokhin was like finding the Library of Congress of all of Russia's secrets, okay? And yet they come to this country, tell us how the plan is going to be carried out, and we just blow them away, okay? We don't listen to them outside of Kurt Weldon's committee and others. Just the whole thing in the disappearing nuclear weapons that were not only sold from Russia or the breakaway republics, that one minute they're admitting to, and then the next minute General Alexander Lebed is blown out of the sky in a helicopter. And I think it was on your show that we talked about that when Alexander Lebed was killed. And I told you at that point on the show, I said this was no accident. He was blowing up. Because remember, he's the one that was talking about hundreds of nukes disappearing.
And suitcase nukes as well.
Suitcase nukes. So the point is now, can this be stopped? No. I don't know what's going to trigger it, okay? I don't know exactly when it's going to happen, but based on everything that everyone is telling me, and these are people who are in this world, okay, that there is a date already chosen to attack Iran's nuclear sites. Now, why is Iran so important? Well, let me share this with you. In the book of Daniel, the prophet Daniel, you cannot understand the timeline of God until you get into what's called Daniel's 70th week. And the fascinating thing is that Iran has a prince over it. I'm talking about an angelic, if you will, king over Iran, and Iran is Persia. The Persian principality is one of the strongest principalities ever detailed in the Bible. It's so strong, it took the archangels, Michael and Gabriel, a certain amount of time to break through to get to Daniel. See, most people don't realize this. So when we're dealing with Iran, I don't even think of Iran in that context. I think of Iran in the biblical sense of the Prince of Persia. In other words, a supernatural entity. And if people recognize the place that the Persian Empire played in history, and obviously the Medo-Persian Empire conquered the Babylonians, and then you see the statements coming from Ahmadinejad in relationship to the idea that you cannot bring about the Mahdi, the return of the Mahdi or the 12th Imam, until the world's in a nuclear holocaust. You can see how these individuals behind the scene, the Illuminati, the illuminated ones, can be playing everybody against each other, making sure that their spies keep the pot stirred. And, this is something you can't put out a fire if you keep fresh wood in the fire and keep, stirring the embers.
And these leaders are dumb enough to believe it all.
Yep. And that's the deal. So they're playing into it. So, the idea is ultimately it's a war of, as George Ure of Urban Survival said, it's a war of religion and resources. Because right now, China, let's just say this. We'll get to China in a minute, but I want to go back to Russia. Russia is in a position where they owe no debt. The United States right now has over $60 trillion in debt, and that's what we admit to, okay? The derivatives market, of which are financial, and the Russians are talking about this, are openly stating in their press that the United States is on the verge of financial collapse. Someone says, that's just propaganda. No, think it through.
No, all you got to do is look at what's going on.
Absolutely.
You can't keep spending the kind of money we've been spending in Iraq for 5 years.
Oh, and where is this money coming from? And look at
just print it up, Stephen.
You got it. And see, that's when I said on Coast, months ago, that I thought we'd begin to see hyperinflation in the fall. Now, here's my definition of hyperinflation. If you take the debt that's owed out there, which is in the hundreds of trillions, and the only way to cover that debt is by printing voluminous amounts of paper money, there comes a point when the rest of the world is going to say, we don't want your money anymore.
Worthless.
Right. And so sovereign wealth funds, it doesn't matter which nation who has U.S. dollars, that's why you see different assets in the United States being sold off, whether it's the Chrysler building, whether it's the Aston Martin car company. Everybody with U.S. dollars wants something for that. Up here in Montana, the mining property, I know one of the most famous mines in the world, a gold mine, is 50 miles to the west of me, and I was told that the Russians offered double the price, going price for the mine.
Everything is for sale. You got it. Stephen, we'll be back with more. I guess the next president ought to get together with Putin and Medvedev very soon and get this thing worked out, Stephen.
I don't think that will happen, George. One of the things that, is out there floating around, and when I say floating around, even Putin recognized it when he said he felt the Georgian incident was generated to benefit
a political party. Yeah,
right.
He said.
But here's the thing. Again, the if you will, global destroyers, let's call them, that's what they are. They timeline has kicked in.